Welcome back to Crime Time Cases, where we dive deep into stories that grip, horrify, and leave us with questions. Today's story is about Rowan Ford, a young girl whose life ended tragically in ways that shattered her family and rocked a small town to its core. Our story begins on November 3rd, 2007, a Saturday morning like any other, or so it seemed. Colleen Munson, a hard-working mom and dedicated employee at a local convenience store, had just returned home after a long, exhausting night shift. She looked forward to spending the weekend with her 9-year-old daughter, Rowan. But as she entered the house, something felt off. The usual joyful greeting of her daughter's voice was missing. Colleen's first thought was that Rowan must not have heard her come in. She called out, expecting her daughter's footsteps to come rushing toward her. But there was only silence. Unease crept in as Colleen walked through the house, checking each room. The empty rooms echoed her rising panic, and her heart sank when she reached Rowan's bedroom. The bed was neatly made, too neatly, and it was empty. Rowan was nowhere to be found. Frightened and desperate for answers, Colleen went to wake her husband, David Spears, who was still asleep. "Where's Rowan?" she demanded. David, groggy and barely awake, claimed that Rowan was at a friend's house for a sleepover. But when Colleen pressed him, asking which friend, David couldn't answer. He fumbled and stumbled, unable to recall a single name. This uncertainty sent Colleen into full-blown panic. Her daughter was missing, and nobody seemed to know where she was or when she'd left. Colleen's motherly instincts took over as she began frantically knocking on doors in the neighborhood, hoping someone had seen Rowan. But no one knew anything. After 2 hours of searching and no answers, Colleen finally called 911. The Newton County Sheriff's Department responded, initiating a search for young Rowan Ford. So, who was Rowan Ford? Let's take a step back and get to know her. Rowan was born on April 11th, 1998, in sunny San Diego, California. Even as a young child, she had a special kind of spark. She loved the outdoors, especially riding her blue bike and playing around the neighborhood. She was curious, adventurous, and full of life, qualities that stood out to everyone who met her. After Colleen's divorce, she and Rowan moved from San Diego to a small town called Stella, Missouri. This change was a fresh start, a chance to leave behind the past and build a new life together. Despite moving from the vibrant city of San Diego to the quiet, rural life of Stella, Rowan quickly adapted. She made friends easily at her new school, Triway Elementary, and was a beloved member of her community. Her radiant personality drew people in, and she was known as a friendly, joyful child. On the evening of November 2, 2007, Colleen left Rowan at home with her stepfather, David Spears, while she went to work her night shift. David was known in town for his troubled past and bad habits, including heavy drinking. That night, he spent hours drinking with friends Chris Collins and Nathan Mayron before heading out to a nearby farm for more drinks. David would later claim that when he returned home around midnight, Rowan asked if she could spend the night at a friend's house, but his story was hazy, inconsistent, and frankly, it didn't make sense. This inconsistency, combined with David's casual attitude toward her disappearance, raised serious questions for investigators. As the police delved into the night's events, David's account grew increasingly strange. He said Rowan was asleep when he left the house, but later claimed she asked to go to a friend's place around midnight. It didn't sit right with anyone. Why would a responsible adult let a 9-year-old girl leave at midnight without even asking which friend she was going with? And how did she simply disappear without a trace? David's lack of concern was baffling, and as investigators dug deeper, they began to view him as a person of interest. Meanwhile, they also questioned Chris Collins, David's friend who'd been with him that night. Chris had once lived with Colleen and Rowan, and his responses during questioning were vague. He acted strangely calm, which made investigators even more suspicious. By November 5th, 2 days after Rowan's disappearance, the FBI became involved, and the investigation took on a new urgency. Chris, seeming eager to help, offered to wear a wire to talk to David, hoping to catch him in a confession. But instead, he started giving the police a list of places where he thought Rowan's body might be. This raised even more red flags. If Chris was innocent, why would he have specific ideas of where Rowan might be? Days passed with no sign of Rowan. The tension was mounting, and on November 7, Chris was brought in for another round of questioning. His answers were defensive and evasive. Sheriff Clinton Clark, who knew Chris and his family personally, noticed Chris was on edge, almost as if he wanted to confess something, but was holding back. The sheriff encouraged him to open up, hoping to uncover the truth. Then, on November 9, 2007, after days of relentless searching, a discovery was made. Rowan's body was found in a dark, abandoned sinkhole called Fox's Cave, several miles from her home. She had been subjected to terrible abuse, and the autopsy confirmed she had been strangled. The community was heartbroken, and for Rowan's family, the discovery was shattering. Their worst fears had come true. When the news reached Chris, something inside him broke. Unable to stay silent any longer, he called the sheriff and made a chilling confession. Chris admitted he had taken Rowan from her home that night. He snuck into her room while she was asleep, carried her out, and drove her to his trailer. There, he committed unspeakable acts before strangling her in a moment of panic. In an attempt to hide the evidence, he dumped her body in Fox's Cave and tried to erase any trace of his involvement by burning Rowan's clothes and disposing of his mattress. Chris's confession left everyone speechless. He described how he had panicked after realizing what he'd done, trying to cover his tracks to avoid getting caught. The confession stunned the community, and questions quickly shifted to David. Had he known? Was he involved? Or had he simply failed to protect Rowan by leaving her alone with Chris that night? The arrest of Chris Collins brought an end to the search, but left lingering pain and unanswered questions. For Colleen, losing Rowan this way was an unimaginable nightmare. She had trusted David, and even Chris to some extent, to look after her daughter, only to face the horrifying truth that Rowan's life had been taken by someone close to her. The small town of Stella was left reeling, grappling with a sense of loss and betrayal. How could someone they knew, someone who had once lived among them, commit such a horrific act against a young girl? And could anything have prevented this tragedy? These were questions that haunted everyone in the days and weeks following Rowan's death. In the aftermath, the community came together to honor Rowan's memory. They held vigils, shared stories, and did what they could to support Colleen in her unimaginable grief. Rowan's case also served as a sobering reminder of the need for vigilance and awareness, especially when it comes to protecting children. What do you think? Was there a way to see this coming, or was it an unforeseeable tragedy? And do you think the justice system served Rowan and her family as it should have? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and share this story to help raise awareness about protecting the vulnerable among us. Remember, cases like these are not just stories, they're reminders to keep our loved ones safe. Thank you for watching Crime Time Cases. Make sure to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon so you don't miss our next deep dive into cases that demand to be told. Until next time, stay safe and look out for one another.